This week, the Antiques Roadshow comes from a house built fit for a queen, the majestic Kirby Hall in Northamptonshire. And here, in the great garden, where we'll soon be welcoming our visitors to the Roadshow, stands this little-known house, the most beautiful of ruins. Take a look around, and sadly you can see most of it is an empty shell, an echo of its glory days. When it was built in the 16th century by Sir Humphrey Stafford, Kirby Hall was regarded as one of the finest houses in the land. It was considered a great privilege if Queen Elizabeth came and stayed with you on one of her tours of the countryside, and Sir Humphrey really wanted a royal visit. He used the latest architectural styles from the continent, with masses of fine stonework and all set in beautiful formal gardens in the hope of attracting Elizabeth for a stay. But sadly, it wasn't enough. Sir Humphrey died in 1575, the house unfinished, and without the merest sniff of a visit from Elizabeth. The next owner, Sir Christopher Hatton, also wanted the Queen to come and stay at his house. So he added some fabulous updates, like these glorious bay windows, the height of fashion at the time. Kirby Hall looked a dead cert for a royal drop-in. After all, this handsome young man was the Lord Chancellor and one of the Queen's favourites. Apparently he'd caught her eye with his flamboyant dancing and shapely legs. Rumour has it that Hatton and Elizabeth were more than just good friends. But whatever the state of their relationship, it was never enough to lure Elizabeth to Kirby Hall. She never came here. And I have to say, I think she missed out, because this is a beautiful place, one of English heritage's hidden gems. I'm sure our visitors agree as they come to join us here at the Roadshow at Kirby Hall. And if you want to take part in the Roadshow experience, why not play along with our valuation game? Just press the red button on your remote control.
Because the sheer size of it, it's a whopper. Imagine that full of wine. Oh, it must have been a weight.
Absolutely,
yeah.
Absolutely.
What's the history?
My dad, I'm sure it was in the 1980s. He bought it from auction. He's into collecting everything, bottle digging Saturdays and Sunday mornings.
So he dug bottles himself?
Oh yeah, absolutely. The house was full of them. Ginger beer bottles, cod bottles, the ones with the marbles in. And then he used to go to auctions, and he bought this one, like I say, in the early, well, about 85.
I mean, obviously he was attracted to the fact it's got the seal on the front, which tells us who it's made for.
That's right.
And there we are, C. Sheriff 1783.
That's it.
And the family crest, I guess that's a unicorn, isn't it?
It looks like a unicorn, yes.
Yeah. Do you know anything about C. Sheriff?
Well, the only thing I know about a C. Sheriff, we've researched on the internet, and we found a C. Sheriff from Edinburgh in Scotland. Was born in 1750. So 1783 would put him at 33 years old. About the right time to start drinking lots of red wine.
Yeah.
Now, he was a painter of miniatures, and I think he's quite famous.
Yes.
So I don't know if it's ties into the same one, though.
I've had a word with our picture specialists here. They've been telling me about Charles Sheriff,
yeah.
And it would seem to fit in. He was quite an eminent painter.
That's right,
of
yeah.
portraits in miniature.
Yeah.
And he was born in Edinburgh but worked in London.
Right, okay.
And particularly painting characters from the London stage.
Okay.
And it seems he was deaf and dumb and communicated with sign language.
That's right, yes.
But was a really skilled painter. And can you imagine him entertaining at his home famous actors, inviting them to drink from wine from his bottle?
Absolutely amazing.
Yeah. Because these were things they were functional. You kept your wine in the cask in the cellar, and you filled the bottles up and served them at dinner.
Yeah.
Of course, the seal on a bottle adds enormously to the value and to the collector's interest.
Yep.
That's why your father, I'm sure, paid lots of money for
I would have thought so, yes, I would have
do
thought.
you know what it cost him?
I believe it was about 650.
Which then was a fair bit of money then.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, I mean, what you've got, because the size makes this one special. It's the date is important.
Yeah.
I mean, here, the capacity, I suppose that's more than 2 bottles. That's actually 4 bottles. That's a Jeroboam, isn't it? I mean, it's a real whopper.
Absolutely.
And that sort of lifts it.
Yeah.
So, it hasn't done mind. I suppose today, a bottle like that, 7,000?
Really? There you go. Thank you very much.
Even empty.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
I'll go on have a glass myself now.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
I think it's safe to say these are showstoppers. Do
Yes.
they stop your show?
You could say that. They've been in the attic for quite a while. We don't know anything about them. They're pretty gaudy.
So they're not at home on these tables?
No, they're not. They're a bit damaged because they were bombed in the war in Margate.
But shouldn't they have glass domes over the top as well?
Well, we've got those at home.
Right.
Yes, we have got those at home.
So these were in an old family home in Margate without their glass domes?
And the next door house was bombed.
Right. So that's when the duck lost its wing and
Yes.
he lost his thumb?
Yeah, yeah.
So
I mean,
then,
it's amazing they survived.
would it have been a bad thing if they hadn't survived?
Probably, yes.
Because I'm getting the impression you don't like them.
You've probably got the right impression, yes. But
Well-
I would like to know, why I don't like them.
Well, let's talk about them. They are French, very much in the style of Paris porcelain, but these were actually made by a firm outside of Paris, north of Paris, and there is actually a mark on the bottom.
Oh, is there?
I lifted one up. You have to trust me on this. When you
Yes.
get home, you can look. But there's a mark of L&M,
Yeah.
which is Les Tout and Mauger,
Yeah.
which are a French maker. They were working north of Paris in the 1850s, 1860s, and they made these very typical bisque porcelain figures. So this is fired once, not glazed, and then decorated. So you get this lovely, naturalistic, realistic look.
Yes.
And of course, the colours are as fresh as they are today. And the reason they were under glass domes is because when you feel the surface, I mean, you can see here she's a little bit on the dirty side. That's because it is rough, not glazed smooth like a normal piece of porcelain.
Yes.
So under the glass domes, of course, the dirt would have been kept away, apart from when they were in Margate when the bomb went off.
Yes.
It's interesting to note, although these are Native American figures, so he's definitely red-skinned, and his lady she's been a bit airbrushed and a bit Europeanised. So she's pale-skinned and obviously appealing to a European market, which is what they were made for.
Right.
But today these would appeal very much to a Middle Eastern market or a Far Eastern market. And if these were to come to auction, they would sell for £2,000 to £3,000 for the pair, domes included.
Yep.
So do you like them any more?
No.
Jewellery, of course, has the association of love and sentiment, and the turquoise and pearl pendant that you've brought in has that total association with love and sentiment, because turquoise is associated with the forget-me-not flower, so there's a hidden message, and pearls have always been associated with love. So tell me you were given it as a romantic gift.
Well, no, it's been passed down from my grandmother on my father's side, and I'm intrigued about the little inscription in the box.
Right. The pendant itself, if we start with this and then we'll go on to the box. Now, the lower section dates from round about the latter part of the 1830s period, which was all about having these beautiful big stones, colourful stones, as we see with the turquoise. If we turn the pendant over, we can see closed back settings, which again is a way that can help us to date a piece. After this period, they're starting to open up the settings and get more light in behind the stones. Later on, it's had this very delicate little loop put on, which dates it to the latter end of the 19th century, possibly even into the early part of the 20th century. So it's been adapted so that it can be worn more easily and fit in with the fashions of that period. And that's where the case comes in, because the case is slightly later, of course, than the pendant. And we're looking again at a late 19th, early 20th century case, which has been retailed by the jewellers Collingwood in London, and it's perfectly fitted for the pendant as it is there. So very pretty, but I know that you're desperate to know, because on this part here we've got a little inscription which says, "From the Queen, Haddo, October the 14th, 1837. Now, how did that inscription get into a box which is much later, and how can there be an association with Queen Victoria and the pendant? Have you got any clues to that?
No idea.
None whatsoever.
idea.
No. So it is in some ways a little bit of a mystery, isn't it? But what we could do is, obviously we can't do it today because we don't have the facilities, is go back to Queen Victoria's diaries and see where she was on that date. And it's possible that she was at Haddo, which is the home of the Dukes of Rutland. Now, with that history, the potential history, obviously it's going to affect the value of the piece. If we can link it in some way to Queen Victoria and bring all the dates together, then I think a collector of royal jewellery could well pay somewhere in the region of £1,500 at auction for it.
That's lovely. It'll be staying in the family.
Well, here we are in the middle of Northamptonshire, and you come in with 3 fantastic marines by Samuel Owen, the Battle of Camperdown. But I'm very interested to see on the boat says the director, and it's got Captain Bligh, and that's Captain William Bligh, I presume.
It is indeed, yes.
And he was captain of the director at that battle.
At that time, yes.
And we were fighting then the Dutch, and we won.
Yes.
Outright.
Yes.
So how come you have personally inscribed pictures here to Captain Bligh?
He is my ancestor, and he had these pictures commissioned after the battle for Samuel Owen to paint them. And he, of course, had them, and they stayed in the family and came down to me, finally.
He was the most extraordinary man. You know, Captain Bligh, in the 1770s, he was with Captain Cook on Resolution.
On the Resolution, yes.
And then in the 1789, he was captain of the Bounty.
Yes.
And then there's the Mutiny.
Yes.
Fletcher Christian chucks him off the ship.
And all that,
into the 23-foot boat with 18 other people, and off he goes.
And across the Pacific
to Timor.
3,000 miles, I think.
It's
yes.
extraordinary.
It was, yes.
And all he had was for guidance was a sextant.
Yeah.
And his watch.
Indeed.
And that was it.
I know, and he made it.
What an extraordinary, life to have done that. To be with Cook, then the Mutiny on the Bounty, and then the Battle of Camperdown, where he was commander of this ship.
Yes.
Oh,
I know,
fantastic.
amazing, yes. It was an amazing career.
Now, we'll look at this top one here, because here we have the HMS Director firing broadside, and it's signed by Owen, and it's 1798, in fact, so it's the year after the action.
Yes.
And these probably could have been exhibited at one of the exhibitions about that time.
I think in 1798 at the summer exhibition at the Royal Academy.
Was it really?
I think so,
Well,
yeah.
that's fantastic, because he only exhibited a few times there.
Yeah.
And, he painted for a fairly short time, but he was a very good marine artist.
Yeah.
But what I'm amazed by these is the size. A lot of the Samuel Owens I see are tiny.
Really?
They're about this size, yeah.
Yes.
And these are really big. And I think looking at these and the family collection, first of all, if they hadn't had Bligh on them, what would they have been worth? Well, I would have said to you, each one of these, maybe £4,000 to £6,000 each, for each one, okay? But looking at these with his name on, I think I would put these in at £20,000 to £30,000 for the 3.
Oh, heavens.
Well, quite frankly, he was such an amazing person.
Yes.
And it's such a great story.
Historically.
Historically,
yes.
and also the provenance.
Yes, and I am just so pleased that I am the custodian of them at the moment, and eventually my son will get them. So,
And they'll stay in the family for many more generations. Fantastic.
Absolutely, yes.
Do you know, I actually think I've fallen in love this morning. She's so beautiful. I mean, do you love her?
I do. I'm actually totally in love with her, and I have been ever since I saw her.
And where did she come from?
She came from a cousin who died and was left to me about 18 months ago.
And have you done any research as to...
I've tried to research it, particularly because I didn't think that the bronze laurel leaf was the same date. I thought maybe it had been added,
Okay.
but I don't know.
Well, we can get on to that, but what about the maker? Have you researched the maker?
Can't find anything.
You can't find the signature?
I can't find the signature.
You can't find the signature across the back?
You're joking.
No.
You are joking. Oh, you see, now that's because I can't move it. It is stuck in my living room.
I mean, it's Ferdinando Vici Firenze.
Oh, gosh.
Or Florence. I can't believe you've never seen the signature.
I couldn't move her. Once the chaps had put her on the windowsill, that was it. So I couldn't move
Ferdinando
her.
Vici is one of the most prolific makers of that period, based in Florence. And Florence was the centre for carving of marble and alabaster. And alabaster is seen as a sort of poor relation of marble because they don't like the sort of smokiness they much prefer the white Carrara marble that you get. Alabaster is much easier and quicker to carve because it's not so hard.
Right.
And there were such rises in wealth in the sort of last quarter of the 19th century, this type of statue and object, they needed so many more. And because alabaster is so much quicker to produce and obviously cheaper to buy, it meant it was so much more accessible to it doesn't matter in the slightest. She's so beautiful in her form. And where you talked about the laurel leaf, wondering why the laurel leaf, in certain histories and cultures, the laurel leaf can signify victory, it can signify peace, but it can also signify learning. And I think in her case, it's actually the learning aspect because she looks, and she's got everything. She looks sexy, she looks smart, the serenity of the 20th century, and the markets are rising all the time for this type of object. Easily 2,000 to 3,000.
Gosh.
In the 1920s, we are looking at the equivalent of the superstar. Charlie Chaplin, his first film, The Kid, where he produced this amazing little tramp character, and the film came out in 1921. This would have followed closely after, mid-1920s, I'd say. And inside the box, there he is. Much too old to be yours, so whose was it?
Bought new by the mother of my father-in-law.
Okay.
So it's...
grandparents' generation.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Well, interestingly enough, the little tramp that we've got here, it was actually made in Germany. And if you look at the front of the box, that's what it says.
Oh, I see.
It was made in Germany by a company called Schuko.
Right.
And they specialised in these lovely little felt-covered mechanical toys that did great things. Now, I'm not going to let him go because he's going to go mad in a second. But what I would say is that this is one of the first bits of movie merchandise that was ever produced. You know, we're used to seeing Batman and X-Men and Spider-Man and all these other things now, but this was the first movie merchandise. Predates Mickey Mouse. Oh, wow. He was the superstar. And what's he worth? Well, what would he have been bought for? Just a shilling, perhaps. Shilling 1 and 6, something like that. Now, there are so many Charlie Chaplin fans and fans of this particular company, the German company. I think that we'd put him at around perhaps £300 to £400.
Excellent, thank you.
Now, Charlie, last word to you.
Yay! That's it.
Need I say more?
Well, we've just seen this lovely pair of tables with those ceramic figures, and they were your figures, were they?
Yeah, they were, yes.
Can you imagine these in the house here?
These, yes.
They look great, wouldn't they?
They're lovely tables, yes. I love them.
What can you tell me about them?
I can tell you absolutely nothing, zilch, about these tables. They were bought by my great-grandparents or grandparents in a house sale or an antique shop, and we've had them for donkey's years.
So zilch, donkey's years, antique shop, possibly parents or grandparents, or an auction. Now, that's a good start, anyway. We're narrowing it down a little bit. So you've had them for a long time?
Yes.
Okay. Do you use them?
Yes.
In the house somewhere?
Yes.
What I love about these are two things. Firstly, the size. They're a very nice small size, and small is beautiful. It really is.
Yeah.
But in terms of beauty, what do you think about the marble?
I love it.
So do I. Isn't it great?
I love it.
I'm rather jealous. I want some marble this colour.
Yes.
It's got a nice French name.
Yeah.
Brèche Violette.
Oh.
Brèche Violette. So it's a type of marble. It's sort of mixture of purple and sort of yellowy, peachy colour.
Yes.
And the strong veining.
Yes.
This has come from a French quarry. But when? When? How old are they?
You're going to tell me that?
I've had a jolly good look at them underneath, because I was looking for a signature, but they're not signed. I can't find one, sadly.
No.
And there were one or two names I'd like, because this is the sort of thing made copying the 18th century style of Louis XVI.
Yeah.
So the neoclassical style of the 1780s.
Right.
But it's made about 100, 110 years ago.
Yeah.
So they're not that old.
No.
They're made in the luxury market of Paris, so they're really sort of important French makers.
Yeah.
There were thousands of furniture makers in Paris around 1900. A very, very important centre.
Yeah.
Everybody wanted French furniture. That was
Yeah.
the big, important, fashionable thing at the time
Yes.
for many years. What I love are little things like this capital, this Ionic capital here. What's this made of? Have you any idea?
No, but it's light, isn't it? The wood is light.
So the weight is in the top, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
It is carved wood, though.
It is wood,
Almost
yes.
certainly beech wood.
Yeah.
And underneath, this is actually real gold.
Is
Gold
it?
leaf, real
Agree.
gold.
Oh, right.
But I don't think it's worth melting it down. You wouldn't get very far.
No, not
I think they're very pretty tables. They're very interesting. The size, as I've just said, is the best thing for them, because people can house something like this. So, really, valuation. The pair of these tables, lovely pair of tables, worth at least 4,000 to 6,000.
Wow, well, that's a lot more than I thought they were worth.
They're very pretty. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
Covered them.
Thank you.
Well, the objects you've got on the table, this pipe, photograph of George V and Queen Mary, tell me that in this very, very tatty cardboard box, there's a lovely gold-coloured tin. It's known as Princess Mary's gift tin. And the idea was that Princess Mary got a fund together before the first Christmas of the First World War, 1914, and the idea was that every soldier and sailor wearing the King's uniform should receive a present on Christmas Day. And this is what they would have received: a packet of cigarettes, a packet of tobacco, a photograph of George V and Queen Mary, a Christmas card, and you've got the Christmas card here. Sometimes the cardboard box would have contained a pipe, and sometimes a pencil made out of a 303 cartridge case. You could have boiled sweets, or if you were in the Indian Army, you could have spices.
Oh, wow.
So there are all sorts of different options. Why have you got it, though?
It was my great-great-uncle, Charlie Wills. So it's my dad's mother's uncle. And he obviously handed it to either his sister or straight to my nan. And then obviously my dad's inherited it since then. He's still with us, thankfully. And I just thought I'd bring it along today to see what you could tell me about it. I didn't know half of what you just told me, so that's, it's good to hear all that. So.
Well, I'll tell you what is rare about it. The cardboard box.
Oh, really?
That tatty cardboard box is the rare thing. And the reason it's rare is because nobody kept them. Right. And they threw them away.
Oh, wow.
I mean, you could see the quality of it. It's very poor. We see these tins quite often.
Yeah.
And the tins on their own make £20, maybe £25, depending on the condition. But with all the objects that you've got here, particularly with this tatty old cardboard box, and because you've got it, it's going to be worth somewhere in the region of £400.
Really? No way.
Now, I've just realised something. This has come down several generations, hasn't it?
Yes.
To you.
Yeah.
You look like you've got another generation on the way.
Yeah, it's quite imminent.
Is this going to be passed on to the next generation?
Well, he's due in this year, so maybe, it's a 100th anniversary. Maybe he could get it. He's have to fight with his cousin, so to see. If he's lucky, he might.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So this morning you brought me in one of the very earliest TV sets made by Marconi Phone just prior to the Second World War. So we think 1937, 1938. And in addition to the TV, you've also kindly brought me the brochure that comes with it.
Yes.
And it very proudly states that although the picture is a relatively small size, it will be quite adequate and suitable for rooms of average dimensions. Well, look at the size of the screen. It's only, what, 3.5, 4 inches square?
Yes. Small rooms.
Small rooms, and if you just notice at the bottom, it cost 29 guineas. Well, pre-war, 29 guineas was a huge amount of money. I mean, this wasn't for your average guy in the street. You could have bought a sizable car for 29 guineas, so a very high-end luxury item. But also here is a lovely family group, and they're all ranged around the TV enjoying a an afternoon cup of tea and watching the TV. How big is your TV at home?
40-inch.
40-inch? So you obviously don't use this one anymore?
No, no.
So who did it belong to?
It belonged to my father. We didn't know he had it, and 3 years ago he had to go into a home, and we were clearing out his flat, and he had a large collection of memorabilia from military aircraft and John Constable, his two passions, and when we finally removed the final box, we found this tucked in the corner.
Well, it's a fabulous piece. It's in lovely original condition. You've brought it with its brochure. Quite a collectible piece today. At auction, probably a figure between £5,000 and £7,000.
Well, that's one more naught than I thought it was going to be. Oh, good grief. Oh, Dad, what were you sitting on? Bless him, he was on pension credit.
Time for our regular catch-up on items that we've seen in the past on the Antiques Roadshow. And back in 2010, our art specialist Philip Mould saw a fragile devotional object that could have been as much as 500 years old, but was in need of some serious TLC.
Often with an object as beautifully painted as this, and also as dirty as this, only a torch can show up the detail. And I have to say, the more I look at it, the more I find it exquisite.
Yes, it's lovely, isn't it? Every time I look at it and use it, I spot something different, despite the dirt.
I mean, am I right in thinking that for you this is an object of devotion?
Yes, I'm a retired priest, and it lives in the little oratory that I have in my house, alongside the altar there, against the wall.
So you have a little chapel there, do you?
I have a little chapel, and it's part of the furnishings of the chapel.
Well, I mean, I think this is something that requires more detailed research and also deep cleaning, because we just get a little hint here of that blue in the sky. I mean, this is going to radically transform, and with it, all sorts of signature details, one hopes, by which we can arrive at an artist.
Reverend John Allen, welcome back to the programme. Philip, this has undergone an extraordinary transformation, so what have you done since we last saw you?
Philip's suggestion went to a restorer in London, and she had it for over a year, about 14 months, and she took off all the old varnish. There were one or two holes in it which she was able to patch with pigment that matched the original pigment, and cleaned it under a microscope so that you could see all the detail of it, and it's transformed it. If you look at the two pictures at the bottom, I originally thought that, which is actually a painting of the circumcision of Christ, I originally thought that it was the dinner at Emmaus with the disciples after the resurrection.
Gosh, that's a very different social gathering, isn't it?
That, which is actually the baby on the ground, you can see, and is a nativity, as it was before, looked like Christ coming out of the tomb.
Goodness me.
And it's, I mean, it's completely transformed one's understanding.
But it's not just the detail, is it? It's the colours.
Yes.
I mean, it's just astonishing. I mean, it's sublime, the transformation. And looking at this, and looking at the intensity of the colours, one gets an idea, I think, of those often small, rather dark, small windowed rooms,
yes,
where something like this private devotional object would have been. Very little light, possibly a bit of flickering candle, and the spiritual intensity of these wonderful original colours now communicate themselves to us.
It's completely transformed it.
That can't have come cheap, I imagine.
This is the most expensive person I've ever met.
Now, you valued it at the time at about, what, 50, 60,000?
Well, I think 40 to 60 is what I think
40 to 60.
I put. And, you know, at that point, and I have to say still, at this point, we don't know who the artist is. What we can say, though, I think, with absolute certainty, is that it belongs to the northern Netherlands, probably about 1510 in date, reminiscent of that famous and rather terrifying artist Hieronymus Bosch in the handling of some of the figures. But as to a clear attribution, do you know, I don't think that's really what's so important about this. What has come out of this is its quality, its colour, its intensity. And I think it's increased its value as well.
Go on.
God, put him on the spot.
Well, you know, I mean, I know this was very expensive for you to do, and so it should be. I'm pretty confident that a continental museum would pay anything up to £90,000 for an object like this. The condition is much better than I thought. The quality is finer. And can we just open the doors?
Yes, do.
These are such delicate hinges. Here we go. Look at that.
And the carving probably a little bit later, 1520s, 1530s.
I think so. It's obviously a different artist, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's more mannered, it's more sophisticated. It doesn't quite have that early primitive clarity that the doors, both front and back, have.
Yeah. So, John, what do you propose to do with it? Because I know for your father it was a devotional object. You're a man of the cloth. It's very personal to you, isn't it?
Yes, it's still being used now as it was designed to be used 500 years ago. We've actually left it to the Bowes Museum.
Oh, to the Bowes Museum, have you?
Yes, we're Northerners. And therefore it seemed right that they've got a lovely collection of triptychs, but nothing like this. I don't think anybody's got anything like this, truthful.
That's fantastic. That's wonderful. And let's hope also that its original function will not be lost there either.
Yes, yes.
Getting you closer to God.
Well, I hope so. In the north, naturally.
So, you've brought me 3 little books. On the left here, in a way it's hardly a book, it's more like a folder of loose notes in this very rough leather binding. Obviously quite old. In the middle here is a notebook, which has the title in manuscript, The Journal of John Matson of Bridlington, who was trepanned, which I think means kidnapped, from London Bridge, August 1780. And finally, an even smaller book, a little bit later, which has the title Indian Warfare, or The Extraordinary Adventures of John Matson, the Kidnapped Youth. So these are his loose notes. This is a journal he wrote up, and this is a book published from the journal.
That's right. Yes.
Tell me a little about them and how you relate to them.
Well, he was my great-great-great-grandfather. He was trepanned and taken on a ship to India, having been round the Cape of Good Hope, to South Africa. He couldn't escape. He was tied up quite a lot, and then he walked across India, west to east. I know no more, I'm afraid, but apart from the fact that this has been in the family now for many, many years, it's been carefully put away, and I've just come upon it. It's now come to me.
Let's have a little look at it. It's a wonderful journal because the way he writes it, it's actually very useful because he picks out all the important names of the places he goes to in large letters.
Yes.
Here we are, look, the Cape of Good Hope, the island of Joanna, between the coast of Africa and India. All these wonderful words coming off the page at me. Here we are, Negro slaves, presumably he's off the coast of Africa here.
Yes.
Arabia, he's talking about the weather. He's trying to describe the people he sees. Here he is, arrives in Bombay. A little further down the page, seems to be in Calcutta. So this is somebody doing unimaginable distances by sea and by land. And then he seems to get involved in a siege, and he's captured in India. And he's imprisoned, not just for a few weeks, but it seems for a very long time.
Yes.
We were coupled 2 and 2 together and marched up the country to different forts and kept on 1 pice a day, I think as a ration, which is about the weight of a halfpenny, and a quart of flour, which is made of a sort of white seed.
Yes,
It's an amazing story. It does seem to have a happy ending. We can continue going through the journal, but when we get to the end, lo and behold, we find him back at Gravesend and Chatham Barracks. So he finds his way back to Britain, alive.
Unbelievable.
And yet, throughout the narrative, I've seen references to people being thrown overboard, dead, people being, many hundreds of people being killed, his fellow soldiers, and he came through.
He did.
They're very exciting. So I think I'd quite happily put a valuation of £8,000 to £10,000 on these.
It is not for sale in my lifetime.
This is a fantastic quality clock, and what a lot of people don't realise is clocks from this period and this type actually have either a story or a theme running through them, and the theme around this clock surrounds the god Bacchus. Now, Bacchus was the god of wine, of song, music, but also excess and general debauchery. So tell me, how did you come to harbour such a clock that is about excess and debauchery?
Oh, right. Well, came from my grandfather, and he's been in his house for most of my life whilst he was alive. And then when his house was cleared out, it sort of went to our attic. And so it's been in our attic for perhaps the last 30 or 40 years, in a cardboard box. And we've fetched it out just lately, and it's sort of had a place in the house.
Well, everything's there. The clock itself dates from the 1870s, 1880.
Right.
It's what we call ormolu, so each piece is cast, and then it goes through a gilding process. And that gilding process is a mercury gilding, so they took the gold and they mixed it with mercury, and then the gilder would actually paint it on, and then he'd fire the mercury off, and what would be left would be a pure gold finish. You can actually see on the dial the maker's name is Leroy, and it gives his address as the Palais Royal, so a very, very smart area. Leroy was a huge dynasty of very, very famous clockmakers, and the quality of this item shows through. It's a great subject. It's got a lot of things that people are looking for, especially people who are buying at auction. And if it came up into auction, I could see it quite happily having an estimate of £3,000 to £5,000.
Oh, right, yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah, lovely. Well, thank you very much. Thank you.
Pleasure.
Usually when people bring in sheet music, I have to say my heart does slightly sink. But you brought in a collection of sheet music, but with wonderful cover illustrations on them. How did you get this little collection?
Inherited it really in that my great-uncle owned a music shop in the Lewisham High Road, which subsequently closed, and the stock needed to be sorted out, which fell to my mother, who was a musician, so she had an interest there.
Yeah.
My mother subsequently died, and that's when I really discovered them. But I could see immediately that these were a little bit apart from, just your normal sheet music.
Yeah. So how many have you got altogether in the collection?
I stopped counting at 500.
Okay, that's a lot.
Yes, it's in excess of 500.
So they're lithographed. They're all lithograph covers.
Yes.
And the ones that we've selected, as you say, out of your big collection, the framed ones, particularly, wonderfully decorative, the Mad Bull Gallop, it's just fantastic. And this one here, showing the train coming. I'm not quite sure what this poor chap's doing here. The celebrated song of Tommy Dodd. But this would be of real interest to railway enthusiasts.
Oh, really?
And I love this one in particular, the Girls of the Period polka, with these wonderful vignettes on the lithograph covers. This one showing Hyde Park, this one showing some cricket, a cricket match, and then we've got the Derby down here, and the boat race, the Oxford and Cambridge boat race. And this sort of thing would really appeal to, to 4 different types of people. And it is actually a piece of music inside. There's sheet music. This one dates from about, I think it's 1869. There's a date on the back that says 1869.
Yes, probably. Yes, I like that. It's one of
lovely.
my favourites.
It's fantastic. I think in general, an ordinary one would be worth about £3 or £4, maybe £5 for a very ordinary lithograph cover. These ones that I selected, I think you could easily be putting somewhere between £50, maybe higher than that. And for something, where you've got a sort of very, very specific area of interest, such as railways, such as your cycling, such as cricket, I could easily see a collector paying well over £100 for something like that. Just one thing. So if you've got 500 of them, say, maybe more, I think you're looking at easily £3,000 to £4,000.
Oh my goodness.
One ring, one owner. Where did it come from?
Well, I found it in 2012. I borrowed my brother's metal detector, and it's the first time I'd gone out with it.
No.
And within about 2 hours of using this metal detector, that popped out.
And I think he wanted to kill you, didn't he? Well, I nearly do, so he surely
He wanted to go hard on it.
No, absolutely.
So I went straight out and bought the same metal detector, and I've been going mad ever since.
And you found other things. But anyway, you brought this today. And this ring is, in my opinion, 500 or 600 years old. It's a late medieval ring, and it's a cabochon sapphire. And had I been there to find it, I think I would have practically fainted with excitement because these objects are very redolent. They're very strange. They intensely personal objects, and this one has a magical talismanic function, which is interesting to think about for a while, because every precious stone has a specific meaning in the lore of the lapidary. And the sapphire, one of its properties is to protect the owner from the falling sickness, from epilepsy, and from 1,000 other threatening parts of life. But we can't really guess quite what that meant to the owner, but we know that the owner was living in a near colourless world in comparative terms. There were no hybrid plants, there were no noisy coloured motor cars, there was no paint in the way that we understand it, and so when a pure bead of unadulterated colour came across the water from the extreme Orient into medieval society, and it was hard and enduring and set in gold, it was a very potent thing indeed. And it fell off his finger, and his loss was exactly comparable to the amazement and joy of you finding it. But there is one thing to say amongst all this amazing excitement, is that if you find such an object, there is an obligation to report it to the Portable Antiquities Scheme to make sure that you're not infringing the Treasure Trove Act. And single objects that are found in this way are very seldom viewed as treasure trove, but it is an obligation to do it. And once you've done that, it's yours, and therefore can enter the commercial world. I hardly dare mention the commercial world in respect to this, because it's almost sort of sacred object, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I can't imagine ever selling it.
No, something very dear to your heart, and I can quite understand that, and I'm just looking at it now, I feel the same. And it is an extraordinarily valuable object. This object is worth £10,000.
Oh, very nice. I think that was well saved then, wasn't it?
Very well saved.
Wow, that's amazing me, actually. Fantastic.
Well, who could imagine that these two dresses could possibly be by the same designer? We are, of course, talking about Jean Muir.
Yes.
What can you tell me about them? How do you come to have them?
Right, well, my aunt gave me these dresses. As she knows, I've got an interest in fashion history. And this dress she wore to the first night of the opera at the Metropolitan in New York. And because she was going to such a sort of a posh event, my grandpa gave her some money to buy some clothes so she'd feel like she was fitting in. But what she didn't tell him was she spent all of it on this dress and even had to top it up herself.
So when was this? I'm assuming this was in the very early 1970s.
Yes, about, I think it's 1974, 75, 76, something like that.
Well, she was obviously a very fashionable woman.
Definitely.
Jean Muir, obviously, she's a very interesting British designer, born in the late 1920s, died in 1995. I think she was totally self-taught, didn't go to art school. She started her career as a sketcher for Liberty in their lingerie department. She then went on to work for Jaeger as a designer for many, many years. And I think she started her own label in the mid-60s. And her work is sort of very minimalist, very precision, attention to detail. She's often kind of considered to be the designer's designer. And I think she actually described her own work as being engineering in cloth. But she's very, I still think she's kind of slightly underrated in many ways, comparatively to other designers of her generation. And so, of course, you're wearing one of the dresses today. Do you wear it very often? Do you wear all the pieces that you have?
Unfortunately, my aunt is a little bit smaller now than I am, and though I have worn this dress out, and unfortunately, I didn't realise you're not meant to dance in suede, so I nearly passed out because I was so hot in it. But it is gorgeous, and it's an absolute statement.
Well, with regards to prices, I think the suede dress, which is slightly more typical of her work. I think if you were to buy that, you would probably at auction, you'd probably be looking at maybe £200 to £300 on that one. This one, even though it's very untypical of Jean Muir, I think this would certainly have more appeal because of that. And you know, I could see this in an auction perhaps making somewhere in the region of perhaps £400 to £600.
Wow. Okay, that's quite a lot just for a bit of a crazy dress.
This is one of the prettiest things I've seen today. What do you know it to be?
Well, I understand it to be a mother-of-pearl tea caddy.
You do?
Yes,
Excellent, excellent. So you've done a bit of research?
A little bit, yes. I've had it a long time, Bunny. Yes,
Have you?
yes.
So were you given it?
I wasn't given it. Virtually given it. I bought it from a cabinet maker, a local cabinet maker that was a friend of our family who was clearly encouraging me in collecting nice things. And,
Is this your only tea caddy?
I've got a few, but not as good as this one.
Right,
yes,
right.
a few wooden ones.
Well, it is absolutely lovely. As you probably know, there are quite a lot of fakes around, because when anything starts making money, then you get fakes. And so the first thing I look for is the quality. And with this one, yes, mother of pearl, but such good quality. It is the most lovely box. And it would have been, in China, they would have sent over this mother of pearl panels. And it would have been made up in this country. I'm going to open it because, yes, I think you're right, it was a tea caddy, because there are the dividing for the two types of tea.
Yes.
I think it dates somewhere around 1760, 1780, and I don't know whether you know how priceless tea was in those days.
Yes, I have heard something.
Do you know
about
that it was a pound a pound?
I didn't know that. No.
And that is why they put a lock on it.
Yes.
So I would say now it is a jewellery casket, but if it was returned to a tea caddy, it would probably be worth a bit more. And I can see with the Chinese market, as it is at the moment, we're talking about £3,000.
That's good news. That's amazing. That's amazing. Gosh, that's good to hear.
I absolutely love quirky objects. Have you ever used it?
No, I tried to find out what it does, but I've never used it. I put some water in it and...
well,
at some stage.
And did it work?
I thought it worked, yes.
Okay, so let's have a look. Let's see what happens. Won't put too much in. There we go. So all the water nicely spraying out. Right, I better put... let's just stop that.
Yes.
Before we get... we're going to need the fire brigade soon, I think. Pump up all the water. Before any more comes out, I think I'll just quickly do that. Okay, so, yes, it's a fountain.
Right.
What's lovely with this, it goes back to the period before television. How were they going to entertain themselves in the 16th, 17th century? Well, they produced all sorts of novelties, amusements, and this fits very much into that sort of category. And what happened in the 19th century, when this one was made, was that they were getting 17th century design books, and they found the design for this and decided to make it. But how long have you had it?
A few years.
Right. But what made you buy it?
Well, a friend of mine knew that I've collected unusual bits of silver.
And this is certainly unusual.
And he phoned me and he said, I got this item. I don't know what it is. Would you like to have a look? I said, yes, I would have a look. And I said, I don't know what it is. You don't know what it is. I'm going to buy it off you. And I did.
Well done, well done. Yeah. I've only ever seen one before. But it's silver gilt, as I'm sure you realise. You can see some of the silver coming through there. And it's interesting as well because, looking here, we've got Lambert's of Coventry Street. So Lambert's were important retailers. Not only were they actually selling antique pieces and second-hand pieces, but they were commissioning pieces to be made from the antique. And it was made in London in 1875. Now, the actual maker...
George Angel?
Not George Angel, no.
No, right.
I think it's someone more important than George Angel, much better, George Fox. George Fox, and the Foxes were an incredible family of silversmiths. And they were producing these absolutely marvellous pieces from all different periods and so on, whereas so many Victorian makers mixed up design. The Foxes stuck to a pretty pure form, and that's what we're seeing here. So I would think in today's market, as such an unusual piece, we're booking £2,500–3,000 quite easily.
It's interesting to know its function, because I thought it was probably people having fun. They fill it with wine, and then they put their glasses underneath down there. But
well, you could try that.
But then
you've got this coming out of
how
there
you're going
and
to collect it from there going up.
It's coming out.
Yeah.
Yes.
But it never crossed my mind that's the fountain.
Yeah. But that's really all it's about.
Lovely.
Shall we put it on again?
Yes.
I'm dying to have another. I'm dying to have another go with it. So let's fill it up again. Get a bit of pressure behind it.
Yeah.
And away we go.
Why did you bring this bowl in today?
Well, it was left to me by a godmother, and she used to use it as a butter dish until somebody came for tea and said, I wouldn't use that as a butter dish were you, it might be quite valuable. So she died about 1998, 99.
You know that it's jade, presumably?
Yes, I do.
Butter dish.
Is not what it is.
It's not a butter dish. But it did have a lid.
Yeah.
Step.
Yes.
Going round here. And that would have taken a cover.
Yeah.
It's lost that.
Lost
Half of it has gone.
Half the value has gone too.
Where do you think it was made?
Well, as I'm not an Orientalist, I don't know whether it was Chinese or Japanese, but the joke was it's got Chinese writing on its bottom.
Okay, let's take that in order. The problem with your attribution to Japan and having Chinese characters, not Japanese, is that they're the same characters.
Oh, silly me.
The Chinese invaded Japan at various points, and they brought Buddhist monks in.
Yeah.
Monks converted the Japanese, and they brought the characters that they used, which were Chinese, and the Japanese adopted them. So we've got the same characters.
Yes.
It doesn't mean that a Chinese man can read a Japanese newspaper or vice versa. It's more complicated than that. Anyway, irrelevant. It's got Japanese/Chinese characters on the base.
Yes.
We'll come to that in a minute. The Japanese also, leaving aside the characters on the bottom, did not carve jade.
Oh, okay.
So, the Chinese appreciate jade not only according to the carving, but also according to the colour. And this is quite a good colour. It's white, which is what they like best, and it's got brown infusions in it, and they like that.
Oh.
So that's good news. Anyway, that's not the joy. The joy is in the outside, with borders, and with here, what we call taotai masks. This pattern of an archaic face has been taken from Shang dynasty, that's about 1500 BC, bronzes. And they've copied that onto here.
Oh, gosh.
And that archaism is common in the 18th century. And that's when...
So it's an 18th century?
Well, maybe the mark will confirm it, or
I'm
not.
getting a bit ahead of myself. Sorry. I'm so excited.
OK, there's the 6-character mark. Now, the 6-character mark is standard.
Yeah.
It would say, if we were in the middle of the 18th century, when the Emperor Qianlong reigned, if this were the standard mark, it would say Ta Qing, that's the Great Qing dynasty, Qianlong, that's his name, Nianji, made in the reign of. That isn't standard.
Oh.
Instead, it's got a 4-character mark, Qianlong Nianji. Yeah. And then the characters Shang Gu. And that means in archaic style.
Ah, like...
Very unusual to find.
Oh, wow.
Very unusual. And that is, the Qianlong Emperor was a man of exquisite taste. Well, actually, some of his taste was ghastly, but
but some of it was exquisite.
Very nouveau riche.
Oh, I see.
But overblown and blingy. But when he got it right, I mean, commissioning things every day, 10, 20 things he was commissioning.
Yeah.
They all ended up in the Summer Palace, and then they were, of course, nicked by the Brits
and
the French. That's where that came from.
Ah, it was nicked.
That was nicked from the Summer Palace, I bet you.
Oh, gosh.
So, we've got a mid-18th century bowl, lost its cover, copying what in the style of a archaic 30 to 50 thousand pounds.
As you say. I think that wasn't 30 50 pounds. Oh wow, gosh, 30 to 50. Gosh, I've come over all unnecessary. I didn't think it was worth that. Gosh, thank you very much.
You know, for
indeed.
something which is minus its lid, it's a fair whack, isn't
yeah,
it?
it's absolutely beautiful, though, isn't it?
So take a lot of care. I mean, you can use it as a butter dish, no problem, but don't tell me.
I don't think I will. No, but thank you very much indeed. That was lovely.
It was great. I'm glad you came.
Thank you.
It's rather appropriate that we've seen so many treasures here at Kirby Hall, because although it's a bit of a ruin now, in its day it was home to sumptuous wealth. And Sir Christopher Hatton, who lived here and who was Chancellor to Queen Elizabeth I, was so wealthy that he could fund the voyages of Sir Francis Drake, who of course circumnavigated the globe. So there you are. Maybe something you didn't know? From Kirby Hall in Northamptonshire. Bye-bye. Vintage cars and collectibles in a new series of Antiques Road Trip, weekday afternoons at 4:30. Next tonight, new drama, Lacey Turner on the front line in Afghanistan. She's our girl.